In this segment, we'll go over how to balance the Ronin M. Now, the reason why I picked this camera is because it's very light, and with the Ronin M, you can't have anything over 8 pounds. If you're trying to put something like a C100 or more, I strongly recommend you just go for our bigger Ronin, which the setup is exactly the same, it's just bigger than the Ronin M. Also, it's important to note that you keep your lens cap off. I already have an SD card in here and the battery's in here. Make sure that all your accessories are in, and whatever you don't need is not on, or else you're gonna throw off the balance when you go shoot. So with your Ronin M, you should receive this little pouch over here. And inside the pouch, you have 4 screws. You have 2 big ones, 2 small ones. You also have a lens support screw and a lens mount and 3 Allen keys. If your lens is a little heavier than this 2470, you would then use your lens support and your lens support screw. Although it's not a big necessity to include that in the setup. So now we're going to attach the base plate over here to the bottom of the Sony. To do that, we're going to use the small camera screws because that's what the Sony takes in. To tighten the screws, you want to use this Allen key over here. Preferably the big one is what the screws take. You want to try and find the center point of the base plate. If your camera's too far forward, your camera's going to be too front heavy and it won't balance properly. Vice versa, if it's too far back, it won't balance. So you want to try and find the center point, or where the plate can be, where it's not too far forward and not too far backward. So now we're going to start by balancing our Sony a7S onto the Ronin gimbal. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to slide it on. Once it's on, you want to lock the latch. Also, you want to try and find that it's somewhat a little bit balanced. It doesn't have to be perfect the first time around because this step will be revisited later on. If you notice the Ronin goes back like this, don't be worried. It's not broken or anything. It just means that the camera is too back heavy on the Ronin. So we're going to go ahead and fix that. What you want to do is you want to keep it like so at an even pace, and you want to try and move these 2 locks. So you're going to unlock them and attempt to move them forward, which is down. And you do that to try to get the Ronin to stay still. So obviously now it's too front heavy, so we're going to go ahead and move it back just a smidge. Notice on the side over here, you have these scale markings to let you know how far you're going. Reason being is whatever is on the right also has to be even on the left. So if it says a 6 over here, you want to make sure that your left is a 6, or if it's a 5.5, 5.5. So continuing with the vertical tilt axis, you want to try and get it as close to balance as possible. A good way to know this is if your camera is facing straight up with the lens pointing at the ceiling, and if it doesn't move, that's a good indicator that you're moving on the right foot. Another way you can try and move a little bit back. And if it stays in that position, you know that you're doing a good job. You can try and move it to different points on the axis, and if it stays there, well then you know that you got a good foot ahead of you. If it moves a little bit, like so, or like so, like that, it's not the end of the world because we still got different points to balance on this Ronin. So continuing on, we're going to move on to the roll axis. So the roll axis is your left to right motion like this. Obviously it's not balanced because when I let my finger go, it goes too far to my right. So to do that, we're going to unlock these 2 red knobs over here and move the camera physically to the left, or to my left. And again, you want to have the camera pointing to the ceiling, or the lens pointing to the ceiling. So now we're going to move to the left just a bit. And again, I can look at my scale over here, my markers. And if you notice, it stayed straight. It didn't go too far to the left, too far to the right. So that's a good indicator that I did it right the first time around. So now I'm just going to lock them in place. I'm going to see if I can go to the left. So it could use a little bit of adjustment here and there. But for the most part, if I hold it straight to the ceiling, it doesn't go anywhere. So going back to the tilt axis, if you remember the tilt axis, that's when we first slide the camera in. So obviously we did the adjustment we had to do to the vertical tilt and the roll, but obviously the camera goes a little bit far back now. So we're going to adjust the tilt axis to fix that over here. And just like everywhere else, we have our little scale points right over there. So I'm going to unlatch it and I'll move the camera a little bit forward. And I'm there. Doesn't have to be a big adjustment, can just be centimeters. now that we got the previous axis out of the way, we're gonna move on to the pan axis, which is actually located on the back side of the Ronin. Right over here. This little red knob is the lock for it. So we're gonna check that that's balanced too. So by doing that, you wanna try and lift the Ronin up or down. So I lift it to the back and obviously it spins, so it's not very well balanced. You wanna do this on both sides, one with the camera facing front my way and one facing away from me. So see, it's moving again from that direction. So since it's continuing to move, we gotta adjust both sides. So to do that, we're gonna go over here. We're gonna unlock the pan axis. And we're gonna move it front. See if we can get it, see if it does anything. This is another reason why it's good to have the battery already in here as opposed to right before you turn it on. So now let's try moving it up. It doesn't move as much as it does, but it's still moving. So we're almost there. A little bit forward. And looks like it's staying almost. Let me try again. And now it's no longer moving. So if I go back this way, it doesn't move again. Let's try backwards. It's not moving. It's not moving. So now that we got the pan axis balanced, we're gonna go ahead and close this so we can move on again. And there we go. Also, it's worth mentioning, not a big necessity to adjust, but behind where the camera sits in the Ronin, we have our advanced roll adjustment or axis. It's not a big deal to change it, and I honestly recommend nobody touching that unless you honestly know, what you're doing, and it's meant for lighter cameras than this A7 or a GH4. With it being the way it is, you can easily balance a 5D Mark III to this small little Sony and it will work. But it's worth mentioning, there's screws there, it doesn't mean you should always touch them. Now that we have all of our axes balanced, we're gonna go ahead and turn on our Ronin, which is right over here where we checked the battery power the first time. You're gonna hold it for a little longer than a second. It's on, place it back, and it's gonna transform for us. And there it is, Optimus Prime. In part 3, we'll go over how to use the DJI Assistant app.